there was a sort of a tragic event that happened.
Mhm.
And it kind of reminds you, don't wait on the things that are really important. Don't wait
Yes.
too long to give your life to God and to live him and to serve him, because one of the characters finds out that can not
Yeah.
work to your favor. You
Yeah.
never know
Yeah.
what's going to happen in your life.
Yeah,
Right.
you can come to that place where it's too late. But then
Yeah.
I see that element in the lives of different people, and as they come to know the Lord, they realize, being a Christian isn't about not having any fun anymore.
Right.
and,
Right.
and being
Yeah.
a Christian can be very uplifting and fulfilling and a lot of laughter. So
Yes.
Yeah. And I think as Christians, our barometer of fun is a lot different than the world's. I know I'm probably boring compared to most non-Christians, but I don't need the things that they need.
Welcome to the Bookish Introverts Podcast. Join host Amazon bestselling author Brett Nelson and avid reader Melanie Dyer as they dive in to review books they've read, then chat with the amazing authors behind them. Quiet minds, big bookshelves. You don't want to miss it.
Hey everyone, it's Brett and Charity, and welcome to episode 9 of our Baker Publishing Summer Author Event. Can you believe we have already had 9 authors on so far?
I cannot.
The time has flown.
It's been so fun.
It has. We are thrilled to welcome a beloved voice in Christian fiction today. With over 100 novels to her name and over 6 million books sold, she has touched hearts with her rich historical settings and characters that stay with you long after the final page. Today, we're going to dive into her upcoming novel. It's called Designed with Love, and it's book 2 in her Hope of Cheyenne series. So whether you're a longtime fan or new to her work, this conversation is one you won't want to miss. So grab your favorite drink, settle into your comfiest chair, and join us for a journey into the heart of faith-driven storytelling with Tracie Peterson. So Miss Tracy, come on in and welcome to the podcast.
hey, thank you for having me. I just love these.
I need you to know you're the first author that we've had on that has made a return appearance. So you're a milestone
I
for
am
us.
honored. Thank you, Brett.
Yeah.
You make it a lot of fun, so I have to say I'm glad to be here.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. Well, the second thing I need to tell you is this girl right here is one of your biggest fans.
I'm a fan.
Miss Charity,
Yes.
well, thank you.
I love it. When
Thank
he
you
told
so
me that he was asked to do this and he was naming off the authors, I was like, nobody else does Tracie Peterson. I want it on that one.
I am honored. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
She has read a lot of your work. So to get started here, Miss Tracy, I always enjoy talking to my fellow authors. And so I'd like to sort of learn about how, of course, you've been writing for many years, but I kind of like to hear how authors got their start into writing, how long you've been writing. It's an arduous process, especially when you're writing your first book. So what made you decide that you wanted to try novel writing? And can you give us a little insight into that?
Well, it's kind of funny. Going clear back to the beginning of me, my mom used to give me a pencil and paper to keep me quiet in church. And she'd tell me to write a story. And the neat thing was she, brilliant woman. After church, she would give me time, just one-on-one, and she'd say, tell me your story. And so I credit her with teaching me to be a great storyteller. But, when I got in school was a different thing. I loved to write. That was my favorite topic and everything. But when I went to apply for creative writing in high school, I was rejected. My first rejection letter. The teacher said I didn't show enough creativity or imagination.
Little did they know, right?
Little did they know, yes. If she were still alive, she'd get one of every one of my books.
I guarantee you.
Exactly, yeah. Nanny, Danny.
Yeah. And I go on to tell people I don't have a college degree. The only college I took was in order to keep up with our fourth grader at the time, who had a genius IQ and needed to learn algebra in fourth grade. So, it was things like that point me back to Jesus. I know this is something God has laid on my heart, has given me the desire for, and the skills, because I never liked English. That wasn't my field of expertise. So I'm very grateful for my editors and whatnot. But, I got started doing little things like Sunday school take-home papers. Remember those? Those were so much fun.
Yes.
And, did a couple of little magazine inserts, and then for a while I had a volunteer column in a Christian newspaper. and really enjoyed that. But my heart was with the novels. I wanted to write novels. And back when I got started, there weren't a lot of Christian fiction novel options. And so when I latched on to Brock and Bodie Taney and the Zion series and the Zion Covenant, I knew this is what I want to write. This is the kind of stuff I love. And so that's really how it all happened for me.
Wow.
And at the time I was very, still am very interested in the historical romantic action adventure angle. And so at that time, Heartsong Presents from Barber Publishing was getting started. And that's where I got my first novel.
So how did that happen? Did they read anything of yours, or did you reach out to them and say, hey, I'd be interested in being one of your authors?
I did reach out to them. In that day and age, we weren't encouraged to get an agent because Christian publishing didn't require that, like the New York houses. And so I wrote a letter to them and asked for their guidelines. I told them that I was writing historical Christian fiction, romantic elements and whatnot, and that it was very much like something I'd seen that they had. And they wrote back, and in fact, I got a letter, but I also got a phone call, which is very unusual. But the editor of the Heartsong line called and asked me if I by any chance was interested in writing contemporary romance. And I really wasn't. And it's so funny because even now I have to laugh because he spent the next 20 minutes convincing me to send him something contemporary. And so I did. That just, it's so funny because
you got to get your foot in the door, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I sent them something contemporary, but I reminded them, I said, I have a historical novel that's already ready to go. And if you'd like to see that, I can send that. I can get that up to you right away. Well, he called me again. And he says, I like your style on this contemporary. He says, go ahead and send me your historical novel. And I did. And a couple of weeks later, he called me again. And he says, we want to purchase it. And congratulations. And I was just like,
that's awesome.
Wow.
This was just such a incredible moment for me because I really felt that God was guiding me this way. And I wanted to serve God with it. Writing for me has always been a ministry.
Now, what year was that? Do you remember?
Yes, that was November of 1992.
Oh, okay, 1992. So was historical fiction is huge these days. Was it as big back then, or has it kind of grown over the years?
Well, in fact, in Christian fiction, historical was far more prominent.
You had
Jeanette Oak doing the Canadian prairie romance type stories. You had the Taneys with their historical novels, and Jane Peart, and just some of the wonderful Michael Phillips and Judith Pella were doing Russian series, and it was great historical fiction, and most of it had some romantic elements. So yes, that was what I wanted to do, and I was just so delighted to see it happening. And as we've seen the years pass, then we've gotten some chick lit, and we've got more contemporary romance. We have the Baxters with, Karen Kingsbury and whatnot. And so we see now we have a wide variety, but in the beginning, that just wasn't the case. You had in the really early years, you had Eugenia Price, you had Grace Livingston Hill, and you had Catherine Marshall with Christie and whatnot. You didn't see a whole lot of anything but historical.
Yeah. So what happened to your contemporary book that you wrote first? Did anything ever come of it?
Published. It did.
I'm going to have to go find that and read that one now.
Heartsong Presents published 4 books every month, and 2 of them were historical and 2 of them were contemporary. So eventually that book came out with Heartsong.
Now, is that the only contemporary one you wrote? Like, I'm assuming. Oh, really?
Yes. I actually did several contemporaries for Heartsong, and I've done several in the early years for Bethany House.
Oh, I didn't realize you've done recent ones.
Yes.
Well,
so those are still available in ebook format, but yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, don't let me bogart the
no, you're
the
fine.
guest.
I'm enjoying the chat.
What you want to know?
Okay, so writing novels, we know, is a process that authors learn and improve on over time. If you could boil down your writing career, what would you say are some of the most important lessons you've learned as an author? that made you a better writer over the years?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, first and foremost, we're always taught write what you know. Because if you're familiar with it, if you're comfortable with it, the flow of your words are going to show it. And so, there were a lot of things that I felt really comfortable with in historic because I read constantly. I love nonfiction, and so I would read tons and tons of biographies, love to read diaries and journal accounts, old newspapers, that kind of thing. Plus, I just love to listen to my old folks talk and listen to their oral histories. That was amazing to me, the stories that they would tell. And so I come from rural farm people in Kansas, and I would listen to some of the things that they had to tell about, horrible blizzards, terrible tornadic storms, wonderful crops, parties, harvest parties, things like that. And it was just always great fun. So write what you know was an important lesson. But I also had a writer tell me, then in turn, learn what you don't. And so I really did a lot to try to study the historical time periods, to be familiar with things, because you can't just throw everything you research into a book. That would sound like a travel log or a textbook or whatever. But if you're familiar with those things, if they come easy to your mind, I'm writing a story that's set in a certain time period, and did they have a particular item? How were they sewing? Did they have sewing machines yet?
Right.
How were they lighting their lamps? Did they have matches yet? Things like that. When you're comfortable with that and you have a basic knowledge of different things that are going on in time, the story flow is totally affected by that. And so I always tell people, get a familiarity with the time periods that you want to write, and get to know your areas, the settings, that kind of thing. So that goes into my next lesson or thing that I think is critical, is do your research. And research has always been really critical to me. My husband's a historian, and so he taught me all about, the details of researching and the importance of, being accurate. And that was
incredible sources.
And so there was a time when I was actually in charge. I was the managing editor for Heart Song Presents eventually. And one of the things that was surprising to me were the number of authors who would write stories that they hadn't done their research. And I would ask them about it, and they said, well, it's just fiction. Why does it matter?
Oh, no.
But
because if you're going to suspend reality, it has to at least be believable.
Yes. And what's amazing is I've had wonderful letters from mothers who use my books in their homeschooling to get their daughters interested in history. So I want to be very accurate. Oh, Charity,
That's
you're
me.
waving.
I'm doing that.
I had a lot. I've read letters from those girls after they've grown up saying, I hated history until I started reading your books. So
that makes it come to life.
I try to be very accurate. It does not mean that I won't make a mistake, and readers love to point them out, and that's fine. I don't mind at all, but I try really hard to be accurate.
Since you've been writing historical fiction for so long, do you feel like you spend less time researching and more time writing? Or do you still find yourself wondering,
I still do a lot. I still have to do a lot for each specific setting, each area. So like with the Cheyenne series, I did 3-book series. And one of the things was, we live in Montana, but we were born and raised in Topeka, Kansas. So we were making trips back and forth, and Cheyenne was the halfway mark. We would stop and spend the night. And a lot of times we saw that there was a lot of interesting history and whatnot. So we started doing a little research each trip. And as I did that, then I just collect the information that fascinated me, because I wasn't yet ready to write about that area. And so when I was ready, I had a lot of stuff to pull from, and a fair amount of familiarity with the area and whatnot. So I was very comfortable with knowing that, that location and the way that it looked, the land formations, where it sits from, nothing's more irritating to me than to start reading a book and they are putting mountains in an area that has no mountains, or or seaside where there's no seaside, that kind of thing. So I had a lot of pictures, had a lot of information, and that kind of thing. So there does come that time where you have a familiarity that you're comfortable with, especially like I was mentioning about elements of the time period. Were they using candles for lighting? Were they using gas lights? Were they yet up to electricity? Did they have telephones? That kind of thing. After a time, you kind of get a feel for. And even if you don't know the exact date for that town, you can look it up, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you know whether or not it's even relevant. So if I'm writing a story set, in Washington State in the 1840s, I know there's not going to be any telephones.
Right.
Yeah. So really, you have to have the ability to not only know broad historical facts, but you have to drill down. So is there an era that you particularly enjoy writing in when it comes to historical fiction? Like, have you kind of hit them all, or?
I've toyed around with a lot. I did a few medieval settings and really didn't care for all the lack of innovation that they had.
Yeah.
But through it all, I really settled into that post-Civil War to the turn of the century, the 1900 mark. That's my favorite time period, Americana, post-Civil War, because you have so much going on. There's, not only is the United States recovering from the war, but you have a great deal of industrialization.
Yes.
Everything changes. It's like all of a sudden we grow up and we have, all sorts of modern conveniences and things that are happening, all sorts of inventions and things like that. And the clothing styles and everything, I just love. So that would be my favorite time period to write.
I read my very first Viking book.
Proud of you, Brett.
I went into it thinking I wasn't going to like it, and I was surprised by how much I really liked it. Yeah. So get out of your comfort readings. Get out of your reading comfort zone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, do you have anything you want to ask before we move into the book?
Well, I do. I just want to know high level, like, what is your favorite, not that you've written, but favorite author that you like is your go-to? Anything they write, you're going to read.
That is so hard because
hard.
There are so many that I love and adore.
Yes.
There are a lot of really talented authors in our industry of Christian fiction. Everything from, I co-write with Kimberly Woodhouse, and I love her books by herself. She does some great, amazing romantic intrigue, contemporary books. She does some great historicals on her own. And so I love her stuff. Judith Miller was always a favorite of mine, another co-author that I just adore. But, the Teenies, again, they were always a go-to when I was younger, because I loved their depth of characters and their details, that they would give to the Zion Covenant and Zion Chronicles series were some of my very favorites. But, I was a fan of Grace Livingston Hill. I was a fan of classics, with Louisa May Alcott and Jane Austen, things like that. I read a wide variety of authors and just, I can honestly say, I have some great favorites. There are just so many great ones. And,
and whoever your favorite is today, it could be different next week.
Exactly. I even enjoy Jamie Jo Wright and some of her spooky stuff. So,
okay.
Yeah. I always find it very interesting. You're basically the queen of historical fiction. So I enjoy hearing who entertains you while you're entertaining us.
Just everybody. Misty Beller is a new favorite. I mean, over the last couple of years, I have really loved her stuff. And she reminds me a lot of myself. Her love of the historical and her attention to relationship and character development.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that. How about we go into the book? I'm excited to talk about this book. Again, the book is called Designed with Love. And let me tell you, it is a jam-packed book. There is so much fun stuff going on. So we've got Emma, She's the main character, and she is a wild child of a character.
Emma reminds me of my daughter if I don't get her reined in. Like,
yeah.
She's 9, and the whole time I was reading Emma, I was like, oh, Jesus, you got to help me. Like, I got to get a handle on some things.
Yeah. Emma was kind of based on thoughts and feelings and experiences I had with my son when he was very young. He told me, he says, Mom, I'm a fun boy and I want to do fun boy things. And that's our Emma. Emma was a fun girl, and she didn't think Christians had any fun. So she tells her mother early on, I don't want to be a Christian. You have no fun.
As a mom, when I read that, I was just like, ugh, I would be devastated as a mother, you know. So,
and of course, our character is the mother, you know, character is. But that's the thing I have actually seen, experienced with some friends, experienced myself, where the kids were just like, you know, all Christians do is sit around and sing hymns and pray, and I don't want that. I want to have a good time. And so Emma comes out of that, and Emma is just, she's got a good heart.
Yes.
But she's got a mischievous streak.
Yes, she's got a mischievous streak, and she needs direction, like we all do. And so from the get-go, she finds herself in trouble, and she has all sorts of things that happen as consequences of her actions. And so when she's faced with a real horrific occurrence, she realizes she better get right with God. She's kind of scared into the kingdom.
So, and I think sometimes that really does happen. I mean,
I think it happens.
I know real life stories of that.
Yes.
If it's effective, it's okay.
Yeah.
So, we have Emma, who's this wild child who doesn't worry about being sensible and practical. We've got Colton on the other side, who's very sensible, very no nonsense, get it done and be, you know, wise about the things. And so he hasn't cut loose. he's rather boring, and, you know, in the sense of, you know, I'm going to focus on work. But Emma comes into his life through his younger brother, who has decided he and Emma are going to get married so they can travel the world and have fun. And he falls in love with her from the get-go, but he says nothing because she's his brother's fiance.
Sure.
So, you know, when Emma becomes available then to him, he wants to do whatever he can to win her over. And in the middle of it all is Rosie. And Rosie is
she's my favorite character.
Oh, I love Rosie.
She's so sweet.
Rosie's a character kind of based on a couple of people I know. My granddaughter, who was born with hydrocephalic cyst on the brain. And she, the doctor was telling us, you know, she probably wouldn't even live to be 5. And here she is, 23. She just celebrated her 23rd birthday, and she is a card.
Now, is she who you dedicated the book to?
Yes.
At the beginning.
Rainey.
Okay.
And so then also I had a family member, and this was back in the day when I was a little kid, who would tell people that she was born dead. And it just amused me because even as a little kid, I'm like, how can you be born dead? But she had the cord wrapped around her neck 3 times. And so when she was born, she wasn't breathing. And, you know, the doctors told her parents, once they got her breathing and everything, that she would probably have terrible brain damage, and she probably wouldn't be able to do anything. And, you know, the setting for my book is in the 1890s. And in that time period, they just didn't do much with those kind of people. Right. And so the doctor told him, you know, with Rosie was born dead. She tells people, she has no filter. She just tells people like it is. And they just kind of put her in a room and let her exist, but didn't teach her anything, didn't do anything with her.
She was kind of invisible where the family was concerned.
Yeah.
Yes. And, you know, she had brothers and they loved her and everything, but nobody really worried about her doing anything in life or being anything. Emma comes along and she says, why not? Why can't Rosie learn? And I love that about Emma, because for as much of a fun girl as she was, it kind of left her without the normal restrictions that a lot of people put upon themselves. So she sees Rosie's potential and comes alongside Rosie and teaches her all these things. And as Rosie starts to learn, oh, good night. She wants to learn everything.
Everything. Yeah. Yeah.
So she starts in on one thing and then she's like, well, can I learn that too? And, what about this? And so
Yeah.
I love Rosie.
Yeah. She gave a very light presence to the story.
Every time she was on the page, I was smiling.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
One lesson I did kind of take away from the book, Emma, she, like you said, she didn't want to focus on God right now because she just wanted to have fun. And then of course there was a sort of a tragic event that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of reminds you, okay, don't wait on the things that are really important. Don't wait too long to give your life to God and to live him and to serve him, because one of the characters finds out that can not work to your favor. You never know what's going to happen in your life.
Yeah, you can come to that place where it's too late. And sadly, that's what Emma fears, and sees that, okay, maybe I need to take life a little more seriously. But then, like I said, I see that element in the lives of different people. And as they come to know the Lord, they realize, being a Christian isn't about not having any fun anymore.
Right.
And being a Christian can be very, uplifting and fulfilling and a lot of laughter. So,
yes.
Yeah. Well, and I think as Christians, our barometer of fun is a lot different than the world's. I know I'm probably boring compared to most non-Christians, but I don't need the things that they need,
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Right. I think another character that I really loved was Lucille.
Oh, yeah.
I have a stepmom, and she's a wonderful, godly woman. And so much of what I saw Lucille and that relationship, I was just the whole time thinking of Michelle, like, man, thank God for these women that will step in and, be there and be that spiritual mother that we need, and love on us when we need it. Because my stepmother has certainly been that in my life.
Absolutely.
So I particularly enjoyed her character.
Oh, I'm glad.
It was nice to see a step parent depicted in a way that they weren't the evil step parents.
Yes.
Because Lucille was really, Lucille really was instrumental in bringing Emma to the Lord.
Yes.
Yes.
Teaching her that just because you have a past doesn't mean you can't have a future with the Lord. So,
right. Yeah. And people have asked me, is this an independent series where each book stands completely alone, or is it dependent on the book before? And it's both, because you get threads. Lucille was in book 1, but she's not the focal character in book 2, or even that strong of a character that comes through all the time. But in this series, you can read each book by itself, but it's better, I think, probably if you read them in order.
Yeah, I always think series are better if you read them in order, even if they're basically standalones. I just think it's better. So how many characters from this book are in the first book? Is it just Lucille, or
goodness,
are there several?
There are several. The sheriff, Edward. Then there's Rosie finds interest with Edward's family and his son. And so, there's a few characters that come in from the other series. In fact, Edward's in the very first series, The Heart of Cheyenne. And so we just have a little thread here and there that come throughout the entire series of people who were in the first series and the second series.
Yeah, that gives you just that little sense of familiarity.
Yes. And if you have read them all, then you're in the know. And I've had readers tell me, I always feel like I've got, I'm one up on everybody.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Now, I want to ask you, I want to bring up a little something that's probably an odd thing to bring up, but do you ever just read things in a book and it's totally weird, but it pops out at you? So there is a little bit of talk of suicide in the book, and Emma thinks suicide was not at all an acceptable means of death. And she wondered if there was a special cemetery for such people. And I can't even remember, because this book is not about suicide.
No.
Like, was there a stigma too? Because I don't feel like there is that much of a stigma today.
It was a very big deal.
Really?
Yeah. Horrific. They would not bury someone in the churchyard who had committed suicide.
Right.
Because they felt they were hopelessly lost. that if you took your life, you couldn't possibly be saved.
And I know people like that today that think that.
Exactly. Yeah. In book 1, in Constant Love, book 1 in The Hope of Cheyenne, we deal with the issue of suicide because I had had a family member take his life, and it was just a heartbreaking situation. But he was saved. He was a Christian. He had done wonderful things for the Lord, and his heart, I knew his heart was right, but he had lost hope. He had felt so overcome by grief and various issues in his life. And so we addressed that issue in the first book about, where would a person who commits suicide go? Would they go to heaven if they were saved? Could they really be saved? And all these things. So, I pull from the Romans 8:38 and 39 verse, nothing can separate us from the love of God.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Not even death. So, we focus on that and several other verses in Romans 8 that I really felt were powerful inspiration for those kind of issues. But yes, it was a terrible stigma, and you didn't tell people if you could get away with it. You didn't tell people that somebody had killed themselves or that somebody was thinking about that or tried it or anything. And those things were hidden away because of the stigma.
And I think there probably still is a stigma even today. I don't think it's probably as bad, but people don't talk about stuff like that. And of course, it's no one's business if someone in your family commits suicide. That's really not something everybody needs to know anyway.
But they need to, they need to talk about it because unfortunately, those members of the family left behind are just overwhelmed with grief and with the added, you have somebody die in your family from illness or car accident or whatever. There usually isn't the guilt associated that there is with a suicide.
Yes, because you're always stuck with the what if I had known?
Yes.
What if I had
what
done
could we
more?
have done differently?
Yeah.
Why didn't I see this?
Yeah, exactly. So even though that it's not a part of the book, there was just that little bitty, and I was like, that just really popped into my mind and made me think.
Stuck out to you.
Yeah. Another thing that I kind of want to hit on, the Worth dresses. Again, that's one of those. And
I'm curious about this too.
And I Googled it.
Is Worth like a department store or something?
No, these were the designers. These were very expensive designer dresses that nowadays if we were to pay what they paid then, we'd be paying like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 even upwards, because these were extremely.
So these were like couture fashion of the time.
Yes, of the day. So the House of Worth was definitely one of those places that wealthy women vied to get their clothes.
All right.
Was it everyday wear for the wealthy, or was it more special occasion? Do you know?
There were some everyday stuff, like as in traveling suits, some day dresses and things like that. But the focus was the very exotic evening wear and the gowns for special occasions. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. That just really interested me. So of course I Googled some pictures of it, and they're pretty elaborate.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
They are. A lot of exotic. They took time with adding, pearls and adding gemstones and things like that at times for some of the royalty dresses and things like that. But then like some of the average rich people dresses or whatever, they had wonderful embroidery and just details that they added to these gowns. They were, I encourage people to Google it because it's magnificent if you can get a look at all the different Worth gowns. Yeah. And they're in museums today.
Okay, that's cool.
I'll flash some pictures on the screen for the people that are watching on YouTube. But you should go in. People should go in and Google those, because I'm not into fashion that much, but I still, it was fun looking at all the different dresses.
I give not two hoots about current fashion, but I love like historical fashion. I think it's a lot of the beauty has been lost, I think, in how we dress today. I mean, here I am sitting here in my tie-dye t-shirt and my jeans. Whereas, wouldn't I feel prettier if I had like a pretty dress on or something,
Yeah.
So I think we've sacrificed beauty for functionality in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And back then, I think the faction was really functional and beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the funny thing to me, again, I'm new to historical fiction. So in my mind, everybody in those days dressed like, the Little House on the Prairie people, Ma Ingalls. And this book took place in like the late 1800s.
1880s.
18, yeah. So in my mind, I was like shocked when I Googled and saw I was like,
oh, they're beautiful.
Yeah. These people were extravagant.
And men's fashion was so much better than it is now. Men's fashion was 100 times better than it is now.
Yeah.
You didn't see a man, even a very poor man, without a coat. They wore a suit coat or a jacket and hat,
I tell you, we're definitely lacking something compared to back in those days. So let's go. I want to talk a little bit about, there is some drama in this book. And for those listening, we're not going to give any spoilers. There is some drama in this book after Emma sort of becomes an inheritor to a bunch of Tommy, her husband's family money, and his brothers are not happy about it.
They were my least two favorite characters, which I think they were supposed to be. Yeah. But I was just like, yuck.
that was their point. And boy, but they sure made the story go.
They
fast.
did.
So I even,
havoc.
Yeah. But you got to have people to create havoc in your book, right?
You do. You have to make the situation worse.
And I think it's just real life. That would be probably something that, if you think about a family that is wealthy, that has built wealth over generations, they're very protective of who inherits and how they inherit. Yeah. So I thought it was very realistic.
Yeah. And Tommy, his family, they had a very successful railroad, just lots of familiar money. So that really added to the drama of how that was all going to work out. So,
it's always fun for me to find little ways to complicate the lives of the characters.
Yeah. Oh, the things we authors put our characters through, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have a question you want to? I don't want to take all.
You're fine. I'm just thrilled to be listening. Okay, back to Rosie. She's just my favorite. She was so sweet. And I loved that we got a bonus love story with her and Rob. That was just so sweet.
Yes.
But what role do you think that Rosie played in helping Emma and all of the other characters kind of grow as characters throughout the story? Because to me, she really seemed to drive a lot of the growth.
And that's what often happens with these unassuming people that you don't expect great things out of, or who have been written off by society or who have been ignored. And that's, that is exactly what I saw Rosie, that character, doing in the lives of the other people, was showing them the possibilities, showing them the hope. And Rosie is just a very hopeful character that entices people. Actually, Emma is enticed by the accomplishments that she can make. And I think in seeing Rosie be willing to try, it helps Emma be willing to try as well.
Sure.
And I think that's what a lot of times we see, because I know my granddaughter is a huge inspiration to me. And there were people that wrote her off, and seeing her just cherish life and go for the gusto, that influenced my heart for Rosie. And Rosie is that kind of just never say never. And Rosie is that person who sees hope in just any direction that she looks, that she can find something good. And so that was the influence of Rosie. And I think that kind of is contagious. I've been around those people in several different situations, and I love that. It's a contagious kind of hope.
To be one of those people, because she really did put shed a different perspective on situations and on things. Yeah, and that's the kind of people we like to be around in life. We don't like to be around
I don't even mind the people who are lacking in filters, because you get the honest truth.
Authenticity.
I'd rather to have that authenticity than to have somebody, just faking the relationship or faking how they feel or whatever. I'd much rather deal with that and just have people be genuine. And so they're that's the summation of Rosie.
Yeah. There were so many historical details in the book. Can you tell us some of the research that you got to do to sort of build the story?
Well, like I said, we were making trips through Cheyenne on a pretty regular basis there for a while. And so, they've got a wonderful depot museum there. They have state archives. They have Frontier Day Museum. I mean, all these great places and people, wonderful people who were happy to talk about all the things that their city offers that they knew about particular time periods and so forth. And so I just had such a wonderful time researching the details. But Cheyenne is just a fascinating town. It was created purely because the Union Pacific Railroad came through. And so this town is just born overnight because it's a stop along the rail. And as people started looking at its location, north of Denver, west of Chicago, east of, they started looking at this going, well, this is really a crossroads. We can make this a huge city like Chicago. And so, they started having great ideas and plans for Cheyenne. Of course, it never did get as big as Chicago, but it was very vital to the railroad and a huge stop along the Union Pacific, the Transcontinental Railroad. And so that is the 1867 birth of Cheyenne. And of course, there was just interesting things then that developed from there. I mean, there were still issues with various native peoples. There were issues with this being in the middle of nowhere, as far as getting supplies, as far as the weather, as far as bringing people in to civilize. And so the railroad was very big about knowing that families were the settling factor. The civilizing factor was women and children. And so, get their workers in there with their families. And so there was all sorts of things that they advertised and offered: free land, inexpensive lots, in some cases there were all sorts of helps for building houses and whatnot. But in the early days, they lived in tents, and it was a tent community. And then little by little, you got some shacks up, and you got some little houses. And then pretty soon, some of the wealthy people started coming in with their palatial, buildings and houses. And so there's some great old houses in Cheyenne. You can tour a couple of them. But it just is a wonderful place. And the history there was really fascinating.
We got to go to Cheyenne about 4 years ago when my oldest two were young, and we went to the Frontier Days Museum. And my husband's a team roper, so we love all things rodeo and enjoy that. And so we really had a blast in there, but they have brought some of the most beautifully preserved carriages and wagons. And not only were they functional, but again, they were absolutely gorgeous works of craftsmanship and art. And I think I spent probably an hour at one of them just looking over all the details because it was so pretty and so intricate.
I did too. And
They're
I
beautiful.
agree with you. Just amazing.
And
if
I ever move from here, I'm moving to Cheyenne. It is gorgeous. We actually drove out of Cheyenne into this valley, and I told my husband, I have never seen any place more beautiful, so wide open. It was gorgeous.
It's a neat location because it's still on the prairie, but the mountains are in the,
you can see them out there.
And you've got some, you're starting to get the rolling foothills and whatnot. And so
it's beautiful.
It's a fascinating place.
Now, does it feel urban? Because when I think of Cheyenne, I think of, like you said, prairie, just wide open prairie. Does it feel urban, or
some of the areas?
Some of it,
yes. Some of the town, you definitely have parts of it that are well developed and definitely city, but it takes very little to get out into the country. Then you're in this wonderful vast prairie with cattle and just wide open.
I guess it felt pristine in a way that maybe we're not quite expansive enough here. It's huge spaces up there, and in our area, in our two states, it's not quite so much that way. And so that's what I told guys. It just feels like nobody's ever been here before, even though I know that's not logical. There's a highway running through these fields, but it felt so untouched.
Oh yes. And if you get off the main interstate, you can take some of the smaller highways through the state. Amazing.
Gorgeous.
Just the vast, just my mother used to call it lonely prairie. I mean, you get this vast prairie lands or, even the mountainous regions, and it seems desolate, but there's so much life going on out there.
Sure. Sure.
Gosh.
I think I have to plan a road trip now. We gotta go back.
Wyoming. Yay.
Yes.
Now, how far is that? Because you live in Montana. Is that right?
I do. So we border we border Wyoming and, of course, share the Yellowstone National Park with them.
Yeah.
And so we're not far away.
So you're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from it if you wanted to go there, huh?
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else about the book that you wanted to point out that we haven't talked about?
I think that we've covered so much of it, but basically, my heart is that people would come away from the read remembering that God is a God of second chances.
Yes.
That
Yes.
He is there for you even when you have turned your back, and that He is happily waiting to welcome you with open arms. And I just, I really wanted to stress that with the characters in here. And again, don't write people off like Rosie.
Right.
Don't write people off like Emma. I mean,
Right.
people did. They wrote her off as being a lost cause. And so, she's learning throughout the story to come to the Lord, to forgive, to seek forgiveness. And forgiveness is always an element in my stories because I think that there is probably, it's such a critically important part of the Christian walk that we learn to forgive and that we be forgiven.
And so many people are withering under unforgiveness. Yeah, it's so easy to do.
And it's so liberating. People don't realize just how much forgiving someone who's wronged you does for you. And so that's what I hope that my readers take away, that the importance of forgiveness throughout any book I've ever written, and that they would focus on, the goodness of God.
And I think every pastor I've ever had has said, forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. It's for the person. Yeah.
I think that's why, Jesus stresses it as so important, because we are definitely, it's such a cleansing to let go of the wrongs done to us. And it's not, I had a woman write to me and say, I was just fascinated by the way you explained this. She said, I've been churched all my life, and she was an older woman. And she said, and I just finally think I understand what forgiveness is really all about. And so, I love things like that. I love to hear from the readers. And so, when they write to me and I try to get all of their letters answered and all of their emails, it may take a little time. Be patient with me, but I'm there and I will answer.
See, and that's what I love about you. Just hearing that almost makes me glow inside, because not all authors would do that, because it is a big commitment. Not only are you writing, you're trying to reach back out to the people that reach you. So I love that about you.
Do you find that you've kind of got a community, though? Like, I feel like readers who particularly enjoy this type of fiction, I have several friends that are into this, and we will pass books along, and then we kind of built a community around the things that we love and the things that we enjoy. Do you find that to be true with your readers?
I do, and I'll hear several times from some of the same ones. I've had people who have really established themselves as my encouragers, and I love that too. They'll just send me little notes praying for you today, or they'll send me a meme and just, an encouraging thing. And I love that. I love knowing that
there's some give and take to your relationship with your readers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful.
Because writers give so much through their writing, and sometimes you do need to receive.
Well, and as a writer, you're sitting in your office doing that by yourself. It's not like a job that you do communally.
Right.
And so it can be a very lonely, isolated thing. And I have had different times when someone will drop me a note and it's just exactly what I needed at the moment, because God knew. And I love that. And last February I lost my mom, and it was not expected. And so
I'm so sorry.
I got, I had mentioned it on my Facebook, and I had some of the most amazing letters and just emails, kind words, and it was so encouraging. And I think that's what we're here for, to be for each other,
Yes.
the extension of that love that Jesus gives us.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure. Before we go, I got a very definite vibe out of this book, the prodigal, like a prodigal son type vibe.
Yes.
If you enjoy the prodigal, the prodigal child, this is definitely one you want to read. And there is a lot of themes in this book about regret and grief, and that's such a common thing that so many Christians deal with. So, is there a word of encouragement that you would like to give people that maybe are just struggling with regret or discouragement, and maybe they just need a nice word from someone?
Absolutely. I think that one of the most important things we need to remember is that we aren't alone. And not only is God there for us, but a lot of other people probably are more than happy to come alongside. And I want my readers to know, I pray for you. I pray for the people that'll pick up those books and read. I pray not knowing who you are, but I care. And I want you to know that. And these books are, like I said, a ministry for me to share the gospel message, but also biblical encouragement. So I hope that, as you read those books, that you will know that as I wrote them for you. I wrote them just trying to extend the hope that's in me, that God has given me through crisis and problems and issues that I've gone through. And, that I think most of the Christian authors I know feel that exact same way. We care and we want to hear from you.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So we're going to start wrapping this up. What is a genre that you hardly ever read?
Let's see. Probably sci-fi.
That's one of my favorites.
I hardly ever read it anymore. I did quite a bit when I was younger, but that probably is the least that I would read now.
Okay. Yeah.
If you could talk to one person, living or dead, who would it be?
Oh. Well, obviously we're all looking forward to long conversations with Jesus, but
yes,
I'm not sure who. That question, I've had it given to me a couple of times, and it always takes me by surprise.
It's hard.
Yeah,
it really is. But there are people in my family, old relatives that I have heard about, that I would love to sit down and just have long conversations with, great grandmas, and just understand their experience. And I've heard tales and stories about things that happened to them, and I'd really like to know the details. So probably just an old family.
Yeah.
Love that.
When I don't know about you, but there are definitely days when I would just wish Jesus would just come down so I could have a talk with him and say, okay, what do I need to do? What is going on with this?
And then what's great, and I know that you'll agree with me, Brett, then all of a sudden I realize I can do that. And I have that. And he does answer. And he does
answer.
And so I think so often we think, oh, there he is up in heaven with the Lord, with Father, and so distant, but no, right here, right now.
Yes. Pick up your Bible and he is there. He is there in every page. And just he dwells within you and through his Holy Spirit.
Yes.
What were you going to say? I think I interrupted you.
No.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what are you reading right now?
Oh, several things. I'm reading John Comer, Practicing the Way. I just finished his Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Oh, I have that on my to-be read list.
It's awesome. It's Kim Woodhouse turned me on to that. And I just finished reading her A Song in the Dark to endorse it. That comes out in September. It's amazing.
Is it? Oh, look out for that.
It really is. Yes. And so, yes, those are the things that I have been reading. I just, I teach Bible study, so I'm reading some books on that and doing a Bible study on the, what do you call it? The new inductive series, with the Kay Arthur stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Love Kay Arthur. her studies.
Yes, I've read a couple
I've
of
got a little bit of everything going at once. I have just picked up a couple of new books, fiction-wise, to read, and so I've got a whole stack, just like you. My to-be-read book stack is bigger and bigger.
Yeah. There is no way we're ever going to run out of reading material, is there?
No, I don't think so. So, yes.
And you did a lot better job than I did, because I can never remember if somebody were to ask me right now what I'm reading, I'd be like, blah, blah, blah. I have no idea what I'm reading right now. And I'm reading like 2 books.
Exactly. And on top of reading those things, I've got half a dozen nonfiction books for my setting in my next series. So,
wow.
Yeah, I'm reading all sorts of books about Minneapolis.
Oh, all right. Well, that kind of is a good segue to fading out. Can you give us just a little bit of a tidbit into what is coming next from you?
Absolutely. Well, there will be one more book in the Hope of Cheyenne series, and that comes out in the fall. So maybe we'll talk about that later.
Yay.
Yeah, for sure.
That's A Moment to Love. And that will wrap up the series. The Heart of Cheyenne started with a little girl and her need for a home, Carrie. And Carrie will be the last character in the Hope of Cheyenne. So we will focus back on Carrie. But my next series that comes out next year is set in Minneapolis. It'll be a generational series of 3 books. So you'll have, daughter, mother, grandmother. It will be about a family who are the entire family is focused on charitable work and helping the homeless, helping the orphans. And it was, just an interesting thing to research and dig into the various charities of the time and the way people handled the homeless, handled the orphans and things like that. So the first book's set in 1870 Minneapolis, and we'll take it through to just before World War I.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Do you have a sense of when that series will be out? Like, did you say that'll be in the fall?
March of 2026.
Next year.
Oh, March of 2026. All right. So, boy, you got a lot going on, my friend.
Always.
So for anybody that wants to follow you on social media or just wants to look you up, where can they go to do that?
They can come to my website, which is just traciepeterson.com. Tracy spelled with an IE. Just look on the books. And then I'm also on Facebook, author Tracie Peterson or Tracie Peterson author. So, and like I said, I try to answer all your little letters and emails, and they just bring me such joy.
You are such a treasure, Tracy. You really are.
Thank you, Charity.
He told me after your first interview, he's like, you are going to love her. I was like, okay.
Well, I hope you do.
I do. And thank you so much for chatting with us today.
You bet. I've loved
it. For readers that want to follow us, we're pretty much everywhere. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok as
YouTube.
Bookish Introverts Podcast. Now, you can watch all of our podcasts on YouTube. We're on all the podcast platforms like Spotify and Pandora, Apple Music, Audible. Yeah. So we and Tracie Peterson are available.
You can find us.
You can find us. We're not trying to hide from anybody.
Yeah.
You got any last words?
No, we appreciate you, and I've so enjoyed the chat. It's been really, I don't write, but Brett does, but I'm a voracious reader and have been my whole life. So I'm loving getting to kind of hear from the authors, like what this process is like for you. So thank you so much for giving us some insight into that.
You're welcome. And Brett, thanks.
And please keep writing.
Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely.
I need stuff.
Man, and I'm telling you, I have so many books that I've got to go out and read now because I've only read, I think, two of your books. So I got some catching up to do.
There you go.
But I also am going to have to look up the Taneys. You mentioned Jeanette Oak. I grew up on her. Like, I think I've read everything she ever wrote. But I have never heard of them, so now I'm going to have to go find that.
Brock and Bodie, I've got them on a list that I want to do on the podcast.
We need to read that.
Yeah, and Brett, let me know when you do it.
I will.
I want to make sure I hear it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm just saying, if you wanted to read it with us and be a guest host, we'll let you do that. All right. Well, we are going to jump off here, but we are so thankful to you for being on. And listeners, we're grateful for you for coming back and listening to us. We are so thankful for you. I can't remember who's next. Can you?
I don't know about your author.
I don't know who's next.
We have a book chat coming up in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we got a book chat coming up in 2 weeks. So just keep coming back. We've got plenty of content coming up for you. So listeners, we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Bookish Introverts podcast, where together we explore the worlds within the pages. Until next time, stay bookish.